Welcome to another episode of Message from Mom, where we're busting the myth that mothers-in-law aren't necessarily monsters-in-law. And ladies, we have a little bit of a hot topic today. So we're going to take a look at the phrase, okay, boomer. And actually, I am a boomer. And actually, someone has called me that before. Who do you think it might have been? Well, I'll leave that to both of you to ponder.
Why are you looking at me?
Because you're married to him.
Oh, well,
The only person that's ever called me okay boomer was Andrew.
that tracks.
Andrew Jalali,
Yeah,
my
that
child.
totally
But
does.
anyway, before we get into today's topic, I'm going to introduce my lovely co-host to you, who happen to be my daughters-in-law. And to the left of me is Kelly
Hi, I'm Kelly, and I'm married to Beth's oldest son, Alex.
and Chelsea,
I am Chelsea, and I'm married to Beth's middle son, Andrew.
who called me okay boomer.
She's still not over it.
I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, every episode we raise our glass in a toast because we know that you don't have to be a blood relative to love your relative. So cheers to another episode,
Cheers.
ladies. This
Cheers.
should be
Cheers.
fun. You can make
Yeah.
fun of me as the boomer here.
Okay, boomer.
Okay. So my message from mom today is, really, this really made me think about, I always think about my parents
Mhm.
every episode and how to tie the generations together. But I did just take a little bit of a deep dive to the different generations because I was like, my parents weren't the greatest generation. So I was wondering what their generation was called. So I'm just going to give a brief synopsis of the generations from the early 20th century to today. So, and Kelly, you actually put this together very succinctly. So the greatest generation is 1901 to 1927.
Mm.
The silent generation, that's my mom and dad, that's from 1928 to 1945. The baby boomers, from 1946 from 1964, and that's the generation that I am. Generation X, I think, Kelly, that's you. That's 1965 to 1980.
Mhm.
Chelsea, I think you are definitely a millennial.
Millennial.
1981 to 1996.
Yep.
Gen Z or Generation Z is 1997 to 2010. And then now we have Generation Alpha. I wasn't even certain of this.
I
So
know,
that's
right?
2010 to 2024.
Yeah.
So really, we have over 100 years
Mhm.
of, over over a century that we're spanning here. So it's really,
Yeah.
it's very interesting because honestly, the greatest generation or even the silent generation that my parents were the ones that handed off just what a great legacy to the boomers. But boomers are called boomers because after World War II, we finally had peace. We had World War I in the late, it was from 1917 to 1920 or 1916 to 1920. I could have those dates wrong. You can correct me on the podcast or on YouTube. But anyway, we had World War I, early 20th century, and then World War II. Honestly, not too long afterwards. We thought World War I was the war that was going to,
The war to end all wars.
the war to end all wars, but didn't really happen. So, but after World War II, we finally had peace and prosperity, and the GIs came home, and then they went off to college in record numbers and got married, and then we just had the baby boom because so many babies were being born during that time. And I really kind of land on the latter end of the boomers.
Mhm.
I was born in 1958, and as I said, my parents were the silent generation, but I really did like to look at what characterizes each of these generations.
Mhm.
And they do say that greatest generation, and honestly, the silent generation too, they are really depicted as, they had a strong sense of duty and they had resilience and they had sacrifice instilled in them because they really were presented with some very challenging times. We had World War I, then we had the Great Depression, and then we had, World War II. And so there was, honestly, I'm sure living through that era was probably just seemed like one thing after another was slung at them. I think we kind of feel that way today too, in
Mhm.
different ways. But anyway, I really, And I would have to say that my parents really did have a very strong sense of duty, a strong sense of loyalty. I mean, that was the era
Mhm.
that you went off. My dad went off and started off at like AT&T, and he was going to work there his entire life practically. I mean, he did have a few zigs and zags, but that's
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
how things were back then. And so today, when we do talk about okay boomer, it's not in a positive way. It's
Yeah.
it's really in a very negative way. And so, so how did that happen? Because I do think that every generation, like my parents' generation, were kind of rolling their eyebrows. They're, had the eye roll towards the baby boomers because
Mhm.
in their eyes, we were irresponsible. We were
Listening to Elvis.
right. We were
Rock and roll.
I know. So I do think there's somewhat of a generational, when you're handing that baton off, you're like, okay, is the next generation
Mhm.
going to be
Mhm.
able to handle this?
Sure.
So we will take a look at that, but we really do want to take a look at the negativity that does surround boomers. And is it warranted? Did we deserve this? Are we being flip about certain things? Did we not take care of our planet the way that we should be? Did we
Right.
not take care of our resources the way that we should have? So we're just going to kick it off today, and as I said, it can be kind of a hot topic because um, I probably I think it was like a meme that really gained popularity.
Mhm.
What in like 1915 or 1916? So that was really
2015.
20. Thank you. Am I saying 19? Hello.
I don't
I
think
was
we
like,
had
I'm in the
did
memes.
we
I'm in
have
the wrong
memes in 1915?
I'm in the wrong century here. So yeah, there's so many decades here that I'm floating around in
A
my
lot.
mind. So yes, in the 21st century in 2015, that was when I was cognizant of a meme being floated around
Mhm.
really making fun of boomers. And so now it really has just been shortened down to okay boomer.
Yeah.
And we do have a foundational piece. So we do try to um link all of our podcasts into to having a foundational piece. So this is found on Vox, and it says okay boomer isn't just about the past, it's about our apocalyptic future. So it's a great article, and we will link this down below in our description box. But ladies, I'm just going to kick it off, and I'll probably start with you, Kelly.
Mhm.
That in here, let me go. I'm gonna get my questions here. So what is the origin of the phrase "okay, boomer"? I mean, we already talked about the meme, but so what's the whole
Yeah. Well,
thinking behind this?
apparently
Okay,
it
boomer.
started off as in 2015 on 4chan. So the phrase was used as an insult by the forum's anonymous users,
Mhm,
aimed at other anonymous users that basically was calling them out for being out of touch.
mhm,
And I actually was kind of surprised to realize that it started that long ago. I
mhm,
was completely
Mhm.
unaware of it in 2015.
uh-huh,
Like, I don't think I even noticed this thing until like the phrase "okay boomer" or the meme
Mhm.
"okay boomer" until probably maybe I don't know 4 years ago or something.
mhm,
So I'm a little bit late to that game, but
mhm,
apparently, yeah, it's been a thing since 2015, and it really just refers to, or at least its original intention was just basically referring to people who were out of touch. So that
mhm,
could be anyone from any generation, really, who was
mhm,
just out of touch. And I think
Mhm.
I think the phrase has, I think the phrase "okay, boomer" has maybe it started off that way, and then I think it rose to a point at which it was very much aimed at boomers in power.
mhm,
And then now I think it's kind of gone back to its origins in terms of now it's just a phrase or an insult that's kind of slung out at people who are out of touch. And it retained that the whole way through, I think.
mhm,
But there have been political issues in our country that I think elicited more of an okay boomer kind of
mhm,
hurling insults kind of thing,
mhm,
right?
Mhm.
Because we had these very contentious presidential elections,
mhm,
and all of our
Mhm.
leaders in this country are of the boomer generation. So I
mhm,
think it really became kind of this way to
Mhm.
associate just being out of touch with boomers, but boomers in power,
mhm,
Mhm.
right?
mhm.
So I think now that, I mean, we are still having these very contentious political
Mhm.
moments right now,
Mhm.
but I do think
I
that
don't
the
think I don't
phrase,
think that's gonna change anytime soon, which is
no, I don't think
very
it will.
it's very sad. It's very disheartening to me because I do remember a time when President Reagan and, Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill used to sit down over a cocktail and discuss things maybe they didn't agree on, but it was never contentious. But anyway,
Yeah.
we
I mean,
we won't even go down that road. But
yeah.
I do remember a different era and a different time, and I wish it would go back that way.
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No, and I think actually this kind of plays into why OK Boomer has taken
Mhm.
off so much. And I think all of the various forms of media that we have nowadays, whether it's social media
Mhm.
or, just the proliferation of people sharing
Mhm.
their op-eds or, articles, whatever it is,
Mhm.
the idea that um, that drama sells
Mhm. Mhm.
is a really big,
It
I mean,
is.
and
It's
that's not
true.
going to go away.
Yeah. Bad news
So
sells.
the
It really
most
does.
dramatic news stories, all of this stuff is very, and that's why it'll never go back to
Right.
an era of non-contention. There's
Mhm.
always going to be some hot news story that is like, you know, outrageous. And that's always going like, and politics is, driving the bus when it comes to this, because we have
Mhm.
all these news channels that really are talking
Mhm.
about politics all the time.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think the OK Boomer thing is really, I think it's really harkens to
Mhm.
that actually, as far as like it's this contentious sort of uh, derogatory sort of eye roll that
Mhm.
everybody can just use as shorthand to
Right.
mean a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we would all agree that "Okay, Boomer" really is perceived as a derogatory statement.
For sure.
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
can say
And
for sure.
we have so you're Gen X,
Mhm.
Kelly, and Chelsea, you're a millennial.
I'm a millennial.
So would you say that both of your generations have somewhat of an animosity towards boomers? Or what I mean, what are your feelings about that? Because I do believe that the original Okay Boomer was from the millennials,
Mhm.
because they're
You
thinking
started it.
you started
I
because
think
you're
that
thinking your life isn't as good as it should be,
I
and
mean,
it's
I
because
think
of us.
there definitely is some animosity towards boomers there.
Mhm.
I mean, personally myself, I don't necessarily feel like I'm not like,
Mhm.
hating on the boomers.
Right.
Right.
And actually sitting here, I was thinking, I don't really have a lot of boomers in my life, like in my close circle, because
Mhm.
you are a boomer. But before we got started, I'm like, well, my mom is actually Gen X, my
Mhm.
stepdad's Gen X, and
Mhm.
she kind of teeters the line of
Right, boomer.
boomer and Gen X. But
Mhm.
I think that from a millennial perspective, where the animosity lies from maybe people that do have that animosity is when, my generation was graduating from college and we were looking for jobs
Mhm.
and it was a lot harder to obtain a job.
Mhm.
And then the boomers maybe were not all boomers, but
Mhm.
some boomers were going, well, back in my day,
Right.
when I graduated from college, I got a job, straight out the gate and
Mhm.
I was making, X amount of money and I bought a house when I was 21 years old. And that's just very different now
Mhm.
Yeah.
because the economy is a lot different. Getting a job, even if you are not fresh out of college,
Mhm.
it's already difficult to get a job.
Mhm.
People are losing jobs left and right. It's way more. I mean, obviously, I am a real estate agent, but it's way harder to purchase a house now than it
Yes.
was back when boomers bought a house.
Yes.
So I think there's animosity in that sense where we are like, okay, we're not lazy.
Mhm.
Gen Z and millennial, we're not lazy people.
Mhm.
We're trying, but
Mhm.
it's a very difficult out here,
Landscape. It
you
Yeah.
it
know?
is.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, and you briefly touched on this, is when when we graduated from college, I mean, college was relatively inexpensive back then.
Mhm.
I mean,
Hmm.
it wasn't mean, I do know that my parents, because my parents actually paid for my education and my brother's education too, and it was definitely something that they thought about. It wasn't something that they saved for back then.
Right.
Where I know boomers, we saved for millennials. I do know that that's
Mhm.
changed because it has, I mean, tuition goes up. Like, I just remember when the boys were in college, there was no inflation, zero inflation, and it went up 10% every year.
Yeah.
The price
Mhm.
of college went up, and that's how it's been for a long
Yeah.
time. But
Mhm.
I do think that one of the big differences between boomers, we didn't have college debt like
Yeah.
millennials do. And I do think that
Yeah.
that's one of the things that needs to be addressed, and one of the big differences between the two generations, because when you come out of college with zero debt as
Mhm.
opposed to 40,000 or even more,
Mhm.
that's a big difference right there.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And I
So,
think the joke, well, I mean, I remember this before. I don't know if this was maybe before OK Boomer, that meme came
right.
out and all of that
I
happened.
know.
But I think millennials, from my perspective, are always known as like, oh, well, the avocado toast. And we're, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes, I
that's how
know.
I
That's
don't
right.
know how
We
we
were
kind
eating
of,
frosted flakes and
yeah,
you're eating
we're eating
avocado
avocado
toast
toast. Don't
now.
get me wrong.
Yeah.
I love avocado toast, but, it's just every generation gets coined with whatever they,
Right.
there's always going to be hate towards any generation.
Mhm.
But I don't know. The only Gen X, maybe not, but
I don't know. Everyone loves Gen X.
everyone loves Gen X.
I was gonna say
I don't know.
that.
Aren't you kind of forgotten though?
That
I
was
think it is.
actually
Yeah.
what I was
Forgotten.
gonna
Yeah.
say is like
Mhm.
we as a Gen Xer, I feel like we're somehow left out, like mercifully
Right.
in a lot of ways left
I know,
out of
right?
a lot of the vitriol. Because we're just so cool,
Yeah.
actually. Like
I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
My mom's, she's a cool lady. That's why she was born Gen X and not Boomer, because
Yeah.
I
there's no
mean,
way she'd be,
you can thank us.
taking OK Boomer.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you can thank us for grunge and all the cool things that happened in the '90s.
Yeah.
But it's really funny and weird that
Mhm.
because when you really think about it, my generation is the generation that is making the babies who are now
Mhm.
using OK Boomer, or
Mhm.
made the babies that are using
Mhm.
this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and at the tail end, like your sons are, I think they're actually a little bit too old to use OK Boomer as like an actual kind of feeling.
Well, I'm gonna share that with Andrew.
Well, he
Well,
he
the
says
weird
it, but
thing too,
he says it in a way
he
that's
says
just
it in a
like,
joking
Well, of
way.
course
yeah.
he does. Of course he does.
But I think the real feeling
Yes.
behind that
Mhm.
is coming from
It's coming from a
the
place that I'm not always in touch with things. I mean, honestly, that's how it was
right.
used when Andrew, and he was teasing, but he also was, trying. And but I was, but because I think I'm pretty in touch with a lot of things.
But I mean, that's the shorthand. I think that
Mhm.
the OK Boomer
It
thing
is.
is
It
just
But that
is.
the
could apply
shorthand.
to, I think that could apply, like you said, to any generation, not being in
Exactly.
touch with
Exactly.
something. I mean, there's millennials, there's Gen Z, there's Gen X. There's
Right.
everyone at some point in time is not in touch with the reality of what's going
Right.
on.
Right.
Right.
And I think just the phrase OK Boomer is handy. It could be
It
OK
is.
Gen X, but that doesn't sound
It
as
doesn't
good,
roll off
right?
the tongue as
Yeah.
good.
But
Okay, Boomer does.
but
But
also, I mean, I think if the younger generations want to be mad at a group of people
Mhm.
who have created an environment in which it is too expensive to buy a house, too
Yes.
expensive to start a family, too expensive to go to college,
Yes.
too difficult to get a job,
Yes.
all of these things that previous generations have had a reasonable
Mhm.
time doing.
Mhm.
It's never been easy for anyone to do any of these things, by the way,
Mhm.
in any generation. But if the current generation wants to look at who's making these rules,
Mhm.
who's doing the legislation, like how is
Mhm.
this happening? And if they look at those people and they see that they're all in their 70s
Mhm.
and 80s and
Right.
literally dying in office,
That's right.
of course they're going to like lash out at that generation.
Yes.
And they just happen to be boomers.
Yes, and because
Yeah.
we have not really handed off the baton yet, and we really are. I think we're kind of, I mean, this could be wrong too, but I think we're kind of clutching onto power,
Yeah.
I think
like
that's
no other generation had
people feel like the
beforehand.
baton needs to be
And it
handed,
really does,
and
because there does
no
come
one's handing it.
that's
No one's
right.
handing
There
it off.
does come a point in time when that needs to be. I mean, the changing of the guard always has to happen. So let's just take a little bit of a dive into. I mean, and Chelsea, you brought this up a little bit about work ethic and values. So that millennials are, and I think that boomers have even called them snowflakes. That
Snowflakes, which
mhm,
I would veer to say, I mean, obviously I'm a millennial, so
right.
I'm a little
Well, let's talk about
biased
that.
on the situation. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I wouldn't consider, I mean, maybe some millennial, I think, again, this could be any generation. There's always
Mhm.
going to be snowflakes or lazy people
Mhm.
in any generation. But I mean, personally, for me, I've always had, 5 jobs at a time. I've
Mhm.
worked very hard. I went to undergrad,
Mhm.
I went to grad school.
Mhm.
I look at my mom, who's a Gen X. I mean, she worked her ass off her
Mhm.
whole life
Mhm.
to put food on the table for me.
Right.
So even if, and if she teeters, I mean, had she been born a year earlier, she would have been a boomer,
Mhm.
because she was born in 65. And I mean, but even I look at Gen Z,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't even say Gen Z are lazy. If anything,
Mhm.
I would say that Gen Z, they're out there hustling. Like,
Mhm.
they're hustling just as hard as anyone else, like social media.
Right.
They're the ones that are bringing kind of this new age
It's a
stuff
different it's
in.
a different environment. So
Yeah.
I will harken back because I touched on this a little bit when I was talking about my parents
Mhm.
and the greatest generation because there was much more loyalty to your employer
Mhm.
Yes. I do
because
agree with that.
and
Yeah.
things have changed and I can't say that that's a bad thing at all because I
Right.
mean in the corporate world there is no
There's no
loyalty
loyalty.
at all
Yeah.
towards their employees. I mean it used to be like when my dad
Mhm.
was a young man working. I mean, they had pensions back then. They had, I mean, you were locked into this as like
Yeah.
really great retirement
Yeah.
program. And then that slowly eroded, over the
Mhm.
years. Like, oh no, we're not going to have pensions anymore. We're going to have 401ks or,
Right.
oh, well, 401ks, you can only save so much a year. Well, how about an IRA? So all these new, so all the investment bankers are, coming
Mhm.
along and, really
Well,
Dealing new
dealing that way.
products.
So I don't think it's necessarily a bad
no,
thing that millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zers, whomever, that you don't have loyalty because there is no loyalty to be had.
Right.
well, and to
Not
touch
anymore.
on that, so my nana and papa, they both worked the same job. They were the silent generation, so they
Mhm.
weren't boomers, but
Mhm.
they worked the same job for
Yeah, their
until
whole
they
life.
retired. And then my mom actually, so again, almost a boomer, but Gen X,
Mhm.
she worked the same job for, I mean, 30, almost 35 years.
Mhm.
And then she finally retired.
Mhm.
And actually, what caused her to retire from this job is she ended up getting breast cancer.
Mhm.
And ultimately, she took a different path. And through the different paths that she's taken, she's finally started her own business. But I don't
Mhm.
think had any of the illness or anything like that would have happened, or even my stepdad coming in and being like, "Hey, I think you would be really good at this."
Yeah.
Right.
She wouldn't have taken that path.
Mhm.
Does she have a great retirement?
Mhm.
That's the difference now, is that I
Yeah.
feel like the
Right.
millennials and Gen Z, I don't have that.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is the difference.
Yeah.
But I would even say that many boomers did not cash in on like when we first went out into the workplace, we didn't have 401ks. We really did have pensions. And so
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think that the playing field has changed,
Yeah.
Yeah.
throughout the past decades. And so I think there's some boomers that might not even be financially set up for success for retirement.
Yeah. And actually,
But
that's
but just going back to the work ethic. So I really think we can all agree. I think every generation has a pretty good work ethic. So I'm
Mhm.
not really sure what that,
Well,
why that
I think it looks
divisiveness is out
I
there.
think it looks a lot different.
It does.
So
It does.
I think that the economy has changed so much
Yes.
since people were company men and
Mhm.
women, right?
Mhm.
You don't spend your entire career working at the same place
Mhm.
anymore, pension or no.
Mhm.
Like that era is over.
It is.
And I don't think any company expects people to stick around like that, which is
Mhm.
why their incentive packages for
Mhm.
hiring has
Changed
tanked.
drastically
Yeah, like
too.
they're not offering the same types of things
Mhm.
that they would offer,
Mhm.
in generations past.
Mhm.
So I think the work environment looks completely different than it
Mhm.
ever used to. So that already is a very big shift in mindset
Mhm.
that the, quote unquote boomer generation or
Mhm.
okay boomers, like That's the big difference right there, just in terms of understanding what younger people and the younger generations are actually facing, right? When it comes to work. So I think just that understanding of, what types of things people do now for work is very different.
It's completely different.
Right.
And okay, so with that, because when I went out into the workforce in 1980, I mean, technology was not really commonplace. I mean, computers were still, I mean, we were starting to see home computers, and I do remember my mom, wanting an Apple Macintosh, like,
Really?
like nothing else. She was hilarious like that. She was always like on top of things like that.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, when I went to college, computers were like housed in these big, huge rooms, and I was like completely intimidated.
Yeah.
So technology has really played a big factor in switching up our jobs and how we do our jobs. So that probably is one of the things that I've been challenged with as a boomer because I didn't grow up with tech.
Right.
It has been a huge learning curve, and I still think. I mean, I do know, like the boys still get very annoyed with me if they see me seated at a computer or a phone. I know how to I know how to do something. I know how to get there, but maybe I'm not very fast, and they'll like snatch it away from me.
I think that with technology, I think what millennials and Gen Z are doing is we're rewriting the story. So in Gen Z, very much, they're rewriting the story of what a 9-to-5 job looks like, right? They don't want to work a 9-to-5 job. I don't want to work a 9-to-5 job. Who wants to work a 9-to-5 job? No one does. And that's what they're doing is they're rewriting the story. And I think some boomers, like you said, that worked that 9-to-5 job for 40 years of their life. They're like, what are they doing?
Yes.
It's hard to see that. Like I think even so the gig economy, being an Uber driver, being a Instacart delivery, like these are not jobs that look normal or like anything that is resembling a steady job to a boomer or even a Gen Xer, I will say. It's hard to sort of like, I think Gen X has a very easier time sort of relating to that and being like, okay, you're scrappy, you're doing what you got to do. But I think for the boomer generation, that is actually kind of a hard pill to swallow in terms of like, I actually work 5 different gig economy jobs, right? Like that doesn't look like work to people who don't understand that being a generational thing.
You are a boomer.
I know.
And you kind of rewrote I mean, you didn't want to go work a 9-to-5 job.
Well,
that wasn't,
I think I would. I think I would have, but
let's be clear. Anyone at this table would work a 9-to-5 job, and I have before.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't now. I wouldn't now, knowing the kind of job that I have now. I would never.
Right.
Yeah, I would never go back to 9-to-5. But to your point, when I was trying to get back out into the workforce, I would have taken a 9-to-5 job.
100%. Yeah.
But I knew that I probably wouldn't get one because there again, I'll go back to corporate America. They did not appreciate a woman staying home for 26 years and having that gap in her resume, so I guess I am more like a millennial or a, Gen Zer. I kind of had to become scrappy and figure things out along the way. But I do think that we've touched on, so work ethic, work values. Do you really think that there's a difference between boomers, work ethics and work values, and then Gen X and millennials and even Gen Zers?
I don't think so.
No. I mean,
I think everyone is out here trying to survive in this world.
Right?
We're all trying to make money. We're all trying to just survive.
This is where the animosity comes from.
Yes.
And hence, okay, boomer
That's
is
right.
like, because you have the younger generation saying, I'm working just as hard as
That's
you.
right.
I'm trying just as hard as you did. There are very few things available to me now compared to when you were in my position.
That's right.
And now I'm resentful of you for putting me in this situation where things are way too expensive. Inflation is crazy. Jobs are hard to find. Decent work is hard to get.
Yes.
And that's just trying to get by in your 20s and 30s and 40s. Let's not even, that doesn't even bring up the fact of retirement where, I think a lot of just everyday boomers now, like my mom's a boomer, she's 73 or whatever, and she has to actually have a part-time job because she has literally no retirement. So there are even people in the boomer generation who are having the same problems that the younger generations are having.
Yeah.
So I think that when we look at the term okay boomer and it's offensive or it's, degrading or whatever, there are a lot of boomers out there in my mom's situation
There
who are having
are.
to hustle
And
when
I
she's in her 70s,
Yes.
which is like so rough and sad. And
Yes.
I actually think like I even get offended if someone said to my mom, okay, boomer, like in a serious derogatory way, like it wasn't just one of her kids making fun of her,
Mhm.
which is obviously a different context.
Right.
I actually am offended for her because I'm like, no, that's not fair. Like, I'm sorry. She's
Yeah.
not the one responsible for creating the policy that has enacted all of the things that our country is
Yeah.
dealing with right now. She's just a freaking old lady right now who's like trying to buy groceries and live her life, and live in a place where she feels safe, like
Mhm.
I actually personally take offense to the okay boomer thing for my mom because I feel like it's not a fair, it's
Mhm.
not a fair thing. But I do get where the younger generation, like why this eye roll thing has become
Mhm.
the thing that it's become, because I do see the frustration and I do, even as a Gen Xer, I'm, almost 50 and I'm like, I'm kind of screwed, like in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, I don't
Mhm.
really have a retirement plan.
Yeah.
Right.
My 401k took a really big hit in 2008.
Right.
Like so, and I don't have a pension or anything like that. I never had a career that would give me those things. So I feel those same,
Mhm.
Yeah.
frustrations. Um, so I don't think it's lost on any generation. I think that every single generation alive today, there is some group of each generation that
Mhm.
feels the pain that the millennials call okay boomer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so then do you think that there really is animosity between millennials and boomers?
I think there's animosity between millennials and the boomers in power in our country.
Power? I mean,
Yeah.
do you also think it has to do with like housing? Because we still have like a strong hold on housing and housing prices and
I
things
think
like
that's a big
that.
part of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
I think I look to, you know, some people that I'll have a buyer's consultation with and they're renting currently, and then
Mhm.
they tell me what they're paying for rent,
Mhm.
and they could actually be paying less in their mortgage. But the problem is that they're paying so much in rent and on their other bills, they can't even save enough for a down payment.
Right.
Right.
That's the
And
problem.
that's the
No.
problem. And
Mhm.
it's like, okay, well, yes, you could pay less on a mortgage, but
Mhm.
if you can't save enough for the down payment,
Right.
Can't even get
and
there.
even
Yeah.
with first time home buyer programs like there are,
Right.
you still have to at least be able to put 3.5, 3% down.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, because the
So
median price and producer, actually, can you take a look at this of what the median price of a house was when boomers were in their 20s and 30s as opposed to what it is now today? 330,000
I think my
median price. And I think that seems
I
low.
think my
that seems
grandparents
that's
bought their
probably
house
That
for
seems
like
very
that's probably
low.
like a national that's a
That's
national
national.
average.
Okay, national. Okay, so if you put down 20%, you're looking at least
Well,
$70,000.
but you look at
And
the
that's a lot
age
compared to when I was in 1980.
47.
So $47,000. So if you had 20%, then it was
that's insane.
$8,000 as opposed to $70,000. That's
Well, and
huge, a
I'll be the
huge
first to tell you
difference.
is that most first time
Huge.
home buyers are not putting 20%
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
They're putting 3.5% down, sometimes 5% maybe at
Mhm.
most. Most are not putting the 20. And
Right.
even as far as the age of buying a home, the average age now to buy a home, I want to say is 30, or the average age for like people's first time home purchase
Mhm.
is either 33 or 34,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which is way higher of an age than it was when
Right.
boomers were buying a house.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean,
Okay.
so
Right.
oh,
Gen X, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, you can
Well,
see why
there's animosity.
there is animosity
Mhm.
and why it's so upsetting because I
Mhm.
mean, I think I was watching a PBS NewsHour segment that was talking to millennials about this okay
Mhm.
boomer meme and what it means and everything, and a couple of the people were talking about like how it's one thing to like think that you can just kind of go out there and live your life and have your family and get married and buy a house and all of that, but when you're
Mhm.
coming out of like student loan debt. And
Right.
I think that that's one of the major problems that I think they were talking to 5
agree.
different millennials, right? And all of them had student loan debt. And they were like, I came out of this thing in the negative. Like
Yeah.
my skills, like they could
That's
get me a job, but like
That's
the
right.
job that I got is not offsetting the debt that I'm going into it having. And so they're just not doing it. And the other thing that they said was that they're choosing not to have children because they don't want to bring children into
An environment.
like
A
this that they
challenging-
can't afford.
challenging environment.
That it's just gonna. They feel like environmentally, like it's just gonna get worse
Yeah.
with the
Mhm.
you know, the fires and the heat and the cold and all the things
Climate
like
change.
climate change.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So it's a very interesting moment for these young people, and I do feel like they want to place the blame someplace, and I
Mhm.
totally get the
Mhm.
instinct to do that.
Mhm.
And when you look at our current political situation, they're all old people.
I know.
So
I know.
you know, you get where they
listen,
want to put their blame.
and I totally get it because I'm on the one hand, I'm all for staying active, staying vibrant, staying youthful, working if you want to. But I think at one point, I mean, when I was looking at this presidential election, and I'm like, President Biden, before he pulled out, he was what, 84, and Donald Trump is 78, and I was like, really, really.
Bless.
And then they'll be, how old will they be when they get out of office? But anyway, that's a whole, we're not even going to go down that rabbit trail. But I mean, I totally get that as far as the power base. But going back to the boomers, so do you think we're a little bit tone deaf? Do you think we're a little bit out of touch with what reality really looks like for a Gen Z or millennial?
Honestly, I like for me personally, I'm willing to give the charitable read here and say that I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think that the okay boomer thing has become a very, like I said, a shorthand, an eye roll to anybody who's out of touch, no matter what their generation. But I do think for the most part, I don't think that we can look at all of the boomer generation and be like, y'all are out of touch and you just need to go and go off to your
Right.
island. Like,
I feel like you have to handpick.
Mhm.
Maybe some boomers are out of touch,
Mhm.
but again, I think that could be applied to any generation.
yes. I mean,
Right.
when I was
Yeah.
growing up and my grandparents were the greatest generation, like
Right.
they were telling me like, I'd get a tattoo or dye my hair
Right.
pink and they're like, you're never going to get a job. You're
Right.
ruining your life.
My
And
grandparents told me that, and
I mean,
I hid my tattoos from my grandparents for like
No.
10 years.
so I think that part of it
They
is
just now know.
I think that part of it is something that comes along with all of the territories.
Mhm.
But I do think that there is this interesting. So I read this article by, it's an opinion piece by David French. It was in the New York Times from 2023.
Mhm.
And he talks about this idea of workism
Mhm.
being a thing that kind of replaces religion and family or some other thing in your life. So basically, your job defines you.
Mhm.
And that being something that you hold on to and you don't want to let go of.
Uh-huh.
And I think one of the biggest problems with, and this is not, I'm not a millennial, but I think that this is how they view it, is like these politicians and the people who run our country need to let go. Well, the reason that I think a lot of them can't let go is because they grew up in this era where your job defined you.
Mhm.
And that's not the case anymore. So we were talking earlier
Right.
about how
Yes.
your career was, you
Yeah,
had it for 50 years or 40
Yes.
years. Like you had a career, you
People
had
are
a
moving
pension.
away from that.
Exactly.
We've not only moved away from it, but I think that the boomer generation grew up with that. So these politicians who are still,
In power.
in power, they don't want to let go
Well,
of it.
guess who's voting them in? I mean, it's
Well-
us. But anyway, we're not. Yeah.
But when you
It's-
don't have
I'm
very
tempted
many
to go down there, but
choices,
we're not- I know.
when you don't have
I know.
choices, then
'Cause who
what are you
wants
going to do?
Who wants to run for office anymore because of the scrutiny that you're under?
Yeah.
It's insane. It really, really is. But again, going back to values, going back to society, how it's changed
Mhm.
from when I was a young girl,
Mhm.
young woman, and then now in my 60s. Do you think that boomers have been good stewards of the culture that we inherited from the greatest generation and the silent generation?
That's a really tough question,
know, right?
actually.
Can't you? I can't you.
I can't you.
I can't. I can't.
you.
I can't talk.
I can't you.
I don't think that you can just blame the boomers for
Mhm.
society today. You know what I mean? And
But it's easy to do that.
it's
I
easy
think it
to
is.
do that
It's
Mhm.
and
easy.
blame them for the
Mhm.
decline. I don't think you can just blame one generation for that, though. I mean, I think that things happen to society over years and years and years and decades of,
Right.
neglect or whatever you want to call
Right.
it. I don't personally, I just don't think that you can
Yes.
pinpoint it to one.
Right. Because we are seeing climate change. I mean, we briefly
Mhm.
touched on that. That's very different. We're also seeing a difference in the landscape of housing,
Mhm.
what it cost
Right.
when I was starting off as opposed to what it is now. Education. I mean, so many things have
Mhm.
really changed in a 40-year span, but I guess we could actually go back to then the greatest generation, how it changed from World War II to,
Mhm.
when they handed the baton off as well.
Right.
But I do know that the boomers do get a lot of blame.
They do.
Mhm.
They really do for not being good stewards,
Mhm.
and for not passing on a sustainable society. But I think I'm with you, Chelsea. I don't think there's not one thing that we can point to. It's collectively
Yeah.
as and here in the U.S., but then worldwide as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, that would be just like saying, well, all
mhm,
boomers are bad
mhm.
and all Gen X's are
Lazy
amazing.
Yeah,
or what?
That's
or
not true.
or
Yeah.
Gen Zers are
Gen Z
lazy,
or
or
yeah.
Yeah, you
whatever.
can't
Yeah.
categorize
Uh-huh.
every generation in one
Right.
category.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think it is kind of before we wrap it up and we go to my favorite segment, new and noteworthy,
Mhm.
just our consumer behaviors or just behaviors in general, because I do think that my generation, I do think that boomers, I think we still do hold on to that brand loyalty.
Oh, yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I think, so if you love to shop at Target, you're just, you're just loyal
Mhm.
to Target. Or if you love Tide detergent, you
Mhm.
are, I mean, it's really just ingrained in us
Mhm.
to really have that loyalty. Where I think that your generation, I think millennials,
I don't know.
I
I
don't
mean,
think,
I love
do
Publix.
you?
I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, okay.
I am a
I like
avid
them too.
Publix shopper.
Yeah.
I don't like to shop at Kroger. I will go into Kroger if I need to, but
Kroger.
but so there are certain, I do see
Mhm.
where you're going with that, but
Right.
there are certain things where I am like,
You do have brand
yep,
loyalty. Okay.
it has to be.
Okay. Well, and I just see that because, with my day to day job, and
Yeah.
sharing new brands to boomers, it can be challenging
Yeah.
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I do see
Sure.
that resistance because boy, oh boy, they like certain brands. And no matter what, I'm like, hey, here's this new sustainable brand. Cause I think these are
Yeah.
very important
Right.
things
Right.
to be looking at nowadays. That there's a lot of different parameters, but I will share with you, boomers can be very, very challenging. I do think that we can be very stubborn, and I do
Yeah.
think that we can be a little bit
Yeah.
That's fair.
reticent, to
That is
change
totally
brands.
fair.
And so if you like a Cadillac, boy, you're probably going to buy a Cadillac every time it's going to
Yeah.
be a new car,
Yeah.
unless it's unless maybe you're swayed by a Tesla or something like that. But I I do think that we did touch on differences of the generations, which I think
Mhm.
it's good to see. It was good for me to see
Yeah.
how each one is slotted and categorized and what their real
Hmm.
span is. And then the differences between all generations, and then stereotypes. I mean, we do get stereotypes for a reason.
Right.
And I do think that there are some things that, boomers, I do think we can be change resistant and things like
Mhm.
that. And there are certain things that as you age, you do need to be thoughtful about, and you do want to, continue to move forward
Hmm.
Right.
and
Sure.
be relevant. But so do you think we covered everything we needed to about okay, boomer?
I think so.
I think so.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, then we're going to take a quick break and we will be back with new and noteworthy. Okay, ladies, we are back with my favorite segment. So, this is where we get to share something that we've discovered this past week,
Mhm.
whether it's a TV show, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a product. I've really been kind of trying to share a variety of things
Mhm.
with both of you and then our audience as well. So, but I'll kick it off with you, Chelsea, this week. So, what do you have that's new or noteworthy?
So it's new,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna bring it into my Gen Zers because
Uh-huh.
she's a Gen Z, and I think this is probably popular
Uh-huh.
among Gen Z, but maybe some millennials as well. Charlie XCX, her new album Brat,
Uh-huh.
and everyone's saying like, "Oh, it's a Brat summer."
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's where that's coming
That's
from?
where that's coming from.
Oh, interesting.
But it's her new album, and I will say it's a bop.
Is it?
It's one of those where you get in your car and I don't know, it might not be for everyone,
Uh,
but it's definitely she's got some good songs in there that are really, really catchy.
mhm.
And I feel like it's just one of those albums where you get in your car and you just kind of blast the music and,
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
you get into
well,
it.
I'm glad you brought that up because I've been seeing brat everywhere. So what does that actually mean? Because it's like I'm a brat now, or or like you said, it's a brat summer.
Brat summer.
So what does brat really mean?
That's a good question because I don't know if
Oh, I put Chelsea on the
I
spot.
don't know as a millennial if I know
Uh-huh.
the exact answer to that.
Yeah.
But what I want to say, what a brat maybe means or brat summer is,
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Maybe you're
Well,
you're
producer,
gonna do
can
it
you
your
look up
own
what
way and you
brat
don't
Maybe,
care.
yeah, maybe you're gonna.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's not what I expected.
Okay,
Really smart.
Okay.
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 So
Hmm.
a girl that appears vapid,
Uh-huh.
but in reality, she's
Very discerning
very discerning.
And of substance.
and thoughtful.
Well, if that's the
Okay.
case, then I'm having a brat summer. No,
All
I'm just
right.
kidding.
Well, I hear that term, bandied about quite a bit now. And I have been like, in my head, I'm like, what a brat? Because
Yeah.
a brat when I was growing up, it didn't have a positive connotation. So I was really just kind of
Yeah.
wondering what that was all about. So, okay. I'm
Yeah.
gonna check out that album, Charlie X.
If you don't like it, it's fine, but it's definitely
Uh-huh.
it kind of brings me back a little bit to when I was in New York, in grad school, and I want to say like 2011 to 2013,
Mhm.
and just like that clubbing era when we'd go out to clubs, and some of the songs kind of remind me of
Okay.
that a little bit.
I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Kelly, what do you have this week?
Okay, so I am an avid TV watcher, and if anyone's been listening to this podcast for a while, they'll
Uh-huh.
realize that I watch a lot of
Uh-huh.
TV. So I'm sharing a television show. It's called Omnivore. It's a new documentary series on Apple TV.
Mhm.
It's hosted by René Redzepi, who I love. He is the founder and chef at Noma.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Where's that?
And so it's in Copenhagen, and I think we all know Noma, especially recently. I mean, René Redzepi has made a huge name for himself. It's like been routinely like the number one restaurant in the world years running. But he was just in The Bear. So in The Bear, Carmi goes and spends a season working at Noma, and so we get a little glimpse of Noma there.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so René Redzepi hosts this. He kind of hosts it, but he's really more of a narrator.
Mm-hmm.
And each episode takes a specific ingredient, and they kind of do a deep dive on that ingredient. So they have like corn, bananas, which is super interesting because they talk about the Banana Republic that was formed. So very interesting show, very beautifully shot. If you're familiar with the show Chef's Table, they do a lot of food shots that are similar to that. So it's really kind of, making this all look very sexy and very good. So yeah, it's really great. And I love René Redzepi. The first episode is about chili peppers, and he has everyone on his staff at Noma eat the hottest pepper ever grown.
Oh.
And the rest of the episode from when they eat it. So he talks about peppers the whole episode. At the end, he has his staff eat it. And the filmmaking involved with his real guests at Noma and his staff having eaten these chili peppers is so, so good. Really, really watchable TV. Wonderful.
Okay. I'm going to check that out too. These are both new to me this week. And I love that. So I am going to be sharing. So speaking of boomers and being set in our ways, and, really honestly, one thing I do strive to do is I try new things. I really try to stay active. I try to stay relevant. And for me, I've always tried to, continue my workout, ever since it was like 1980 when Jane Fonda burst on the scene with her VHS and, Feel the Burn. So
Mhm.
I've been inspired ever since then to really fit workouts into my life. And so I go off to Pilates 4 times a week, and I try to go to Orange Theory 1 or 2 times a week, and they each
Mhm.
require different workout gear. So for Pilates, I found this brand that I absolutely love. It's called Beyond Yoga.
Mhm.
And I am beyond the moon over it. And they
Yeah.
come with so many beautiful colors and different, so you can have leggings, you can have crop tops, you can have one shoulders, they have dresses, they have skirts, they have so many things. But it's one of the best workout brands that I've come across, and I love quite a few. I mean, I love Zella, Sweaty Betty, I mean Nike, all the usual suspects, Lululemon, but this is beyond my favorite, Beyond Yoga. And recently, I purchased this beautiful royal blue
Mhm.
or purple, depending on how you're
It's royal blue.
yeah, royal blue. Absolutely beautiful. But and I will tell you that whenever I go to class, I somebody always comments on my
Oh,
outfit.
nice.
They're always like, "Oh, I love your outfit.
Yeah.
You're always in colorful outfits." And I'm like, if you're going to spend, it's kind of like sleeping. If you're going to spend so much time pursuing an activity, you might as well have the
Yeah.
best equipment. And for
Mhm.
Pilates, it's the best outfit possible. So Beyond Yoga, and I will share a few links down below if you're watching with YouTube, and you can check it out for yourself. So, okay,
Alright.
ladies, I think we navigated OK Boomer. It could have been, pretty. I mean, it really is kind of a hot topic out
It
there, but I
is.
think I think
Yeah.
we touched all the points that we wanted to. So,
Mhm.
that wraps another episode of Message from Mom, where we're busting the myth that mothers in law aren't necessarily monsters in law.